I have marked a column of my rectangles with the 8-pointed stencil. Now this works out really well because this rectangle is exactly 2 squares. So it's going to meet in the top corner and then the corner that comes in halfway. And then again the corner that comes in halfway in the bottom corner. So it is put together, the stencil fits in the block very, very well. So I've marked maybe 4 or 5 of them going down and I'm ready to start quilting. I have my open toe quilting foot on, my feed dogs are dropped, and I've slowed my machine down. I usually stitch with my foot pedal all the way to the ground, so I put my machine at about half speed. That way I won't overspeed and have to go, oh, too slow, too fast, too slow. I keep my foot to the ground and change speed with the speed slider on my sewing machine. So to get started, I'm going to start in the seam at the top center of this rectangle. I'm going to put my needle down, bring my needle up, pull up the bobbin thread, and that bobbin thread is that extra thin polyester so that I get more stitching out of a bobbin. I am going to put my needle right over top of where I pulled up the bobbin thread, and I'm going to take a couple small stitches, which is stitch, stitch, back stitch. So kind of a tack stitch, and that will hold. I don't know if you noticed, but I was holding these threads as I was making that knot so they didn't suck down and make a bird's nest underneath the quilt. And as I start quilting, the same thing. I'm going to hold these just until I've stitched a couple inches away. So I'm going to put my hands on the fabric and push the quilt gently until my needle hits that center mark of my stencil. So I've stitched into the center and I'm stopping now, and I can let go of that thread and even trim it if I want to here. So now I have 8 points, and what I'm going to do is stitch those points diagonally. So I'm going to stitch halfway from where I am to this back corner and back to the center, and continue through to halfway to that corner and back to the center. So it's back, forward, and back to the center. And I'm going to stitch back, forward, and back to the center here again. What I don't worry about is if I trace those lines perfectly. I don't mind if I see quilt between my stitched lines. I want it to look like a person did it. And if you're worried that all of your snowflakes won't look the same, remember that no 2 snowflakes are the same. So you have all the permission in the world to make everyone different. So now I'm going to stitch to the left side and back and the right side and back. And I'm going to stitch about 3/4 of the way out here. And I'm going to stitch all the way down to the middle of the next one. I didn't have to stitch my top line or my bottom line because they're part of my connector line. Are you noticing I'm very freely taking my foot off the pedal in between each one? It's completely allowed. I don't have to finish this quilt tonight. So, back, center, back to the center. And can you see how much I missed that one by? I'm fine with that. It's staying. I'm not picking it out. To the middle, back, the middle here, and back. Now to do the left and the right, again, I'm going to do 3/4 of the way. And stitch down to the middle of my square. This nearly there pattern has an inner frame of these cream snowflake squares. So I'm going to make a different snowflake in those cream squares just because I can and I feel like it. So I'm in the center. Now, instead of doing straight lines on the diagonals here, I'm going to do a curve. So a curve about halfway and back out. A curve about halfway and back. And I'm going to do the same thing to the top left and the bottom right. So I'm picturing a mark right here, and I'm making a curve to it, pausing for a second and making a curve back to the center. And now I'm going to do the left 3/4, the right 3/4, and all the way through to the next one. You can make the simple one, you can make the one with curves in it like I did. You can make any snowflake you want. Let your imagination go wild. So, halfway up, through the center. Halfway down, through the center. Halfway up, through the center. Halfway down, back to the center. 3/4 to the left, 3/4 to the right, and continue to the next one. Now I have all of these marked, but this is the last marking I have on the bottom of this rectangle. And I'm going to show you how I would do this without markings on the next one. So halfway, halfway, and back. Halfway, halfway, 3/4, 3/4, and all the way through. But as I look at this here, I can see top corner, bottom corner, which is coming halfway from the sides. So I'm picturing that as my square. And I'm getting a picture in my mind of where the center of that is, and I'm going to quilt until my needle's approximately in the center. Now I'm going to quilt halfway up and back to that center mark. Halfway down, back to that center mark. Are you seeing I'm using my fingers as points here to aim toward? Halfway up, back to that center mark. Halfway down, back to that center mark. 3/4 to the left, 3/4 to the right, and I can continue my way through. So here is my next one. I'm going to stitch down to the middle here. Left, 3/4 to the right. You can take them in any order you want. And then I'm ready to stitch on to the next.